So, welcome everyone. I'm Rebecca Vanook, the Executive Director of Library Reads, and thank you for joining us tonight for the 15th installment of the Mystery at the Library Book Club series, brought to you by Sourcebooks and Baker and Taylor. Tonight, we're here on Zoom and we're also streaming this event live on Facebook. So, welcome to those of you attending through Facebook. Now, as I mentioned, I work for Library Reads, and if you don't know what that is, I'm not going to take up too much time because we have lots of talking with our author tonight, but if you don't know what that is, Library Reads is an organization that produces a top 10 list of books that library staff across the country love. If you go to our website, which is www.libraryreads.org, you can find that list every month. You can also find out all about us, and my contact info is there if you have any questions about what we do. But let's talk about tonight. Now, before we begin, I have my usual housekeeping things to let you know. If you have questions, please go ahead and use the Google form, which will be linked in the chat box. Now, we also want you to use that chat box, but use that to say hi to us, say hi to Katie, say hi to each other, tell us where you're from, etc. Go ahead and use that. But for your actual Q&A questions, please use that Google form. It gives us a chance to make sure that we see those come through and that they don't get lost within all the chit chat and saying hello. So use that Google form. Now, if you're on Facebook, go ahead and put your questions into the comments on the Facebook Live post. That way, one of our moderators over there will see them and pass them over to me. If you've been to these before, you know we spend the first half with me and the author chatting, we have our fun trivia, and then we have the last half for your Q&A. So please keep those questions coming for us. We have all kinds of things we can talk about. And don't forget, when you ask a question or when you participate in the trivia poll in the middle, you will be entered to win a mystery book bundle courtesy of Sourcebooks. The winners will be announced at the end of the event. So, I would like to welcome my guest tonight, debut thriller author of Dark Things I Adore, Katie Latari. Hi, Katie, and thank you for being here with us tonight.
Hi, Rebecca.
Let me go ahead and I'm going to read off your bio so people can get an intro for you. So, Katie Latari holds degrees from the University of Maine and the University of Notre Dame. Her first novel, American Vaudeville, a small indie press work, was published in 2016 and had previously been a semi-finalist in Subito Press's annual fiction contest in 2013. Her short fiction has been published in such places as New Journal, The Bend, Stolen Island, Cabildo Quarterly, Pennsylvania English, The Writing Disorder, and more. Her short story, No Protections, Only Powers, was a finalist in the Neoverse short story writing competition and later anthologized in Threads, a Neoverse anthology. Her debut thriller, Dark Things I Adore, is out now from Sourcebooks Landmark. A native of Brooklyn, New York, Katie now lives in Bangor, Maine with her husband, Kevin, and their cat, Alex. I'm so glad that you could join us this evening, Katie.
I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you to Mystery at the Library. Thank you to Library Reads. Thank you to Sourcebooks. Thank you to Baker and Taylor, to the library, to librarians, to the patrons. I am super thrilled to be here. Big fan of this program. Thrilled to be here with my own book. It's wild.
Wonderful. Let's talk about that book, shall we? Let's just dive right into that. So let me get my copy here. I have it on my Kindle. Let's see here. Ooh, is that a nice spooky fall cover or what? Like that seriously is perfect for spooky fall reading, right? Like just creepiness and leaves and everything. So, Dark Things I Adore. This is your debut thriller. You've written lots of stuff before, including short stories, and this is a thriller though. So tell us what inspired you to write this book and how you got into the writing life in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So I was a kid who was always writing. That was like my thing, you know, I was one of those kids. And so I always knew that I had a passion for it. I didn't know how that would manifest as I got older, but I was an English major, you know, all through school and wrote my stories and went to workshops. And And so after I finished grad school, I had this sort of period where I was trying to figure out, what kind of writing do I want to do? What kind of writer do I want to be? And I was consuming, like so many people, I was consuming a lot of, true crime content and thrillers and things like that. I consider myself a murderino and all that stuff. And I realized, why am I not trying to write the stuff I love to read? And so that's what I did. And so that's where Dark Things I Adore came from, was from this urge to be like, oh, I really love reading thrillers. I would really love to try to write one and see what happens. And Dark Things I Adore is what kind of came out of that.
It just kind of popped right out of your brain, huh? I love that.
Yeah, it's like, the initial genesis of it was a slightly different, where it was actually a professor luring a student, instead of how it kind of happens in this book, where it's actually the student luring the professor and all this kind of stuff. But as time went on, I figured out what I really wanted it to do and what I wanted it to be, and here we are.
Got it. So diving into the structure of the book. Now, one of the things I like, because this is the style that I like as a reader, you've got this in two distinct timelines. So we have the 1980s, and then we have the present day. Now, this isn't really a question. This part is more of a statement. Please tell me we're not considering the 1980s historical fiction.
Oh God, I know.
As someone who grew up in the 70s and 80s, I think I just heard someone recently call 1980s historical fiction, and I was like, hold on a minute with that.
That's a bomb to take. Yeah.
But I love mixing timelines. Like, as a reader, to me, that's really, I don't know, it lends excitement to it. I'm also a person who really loves backstory, right? So that to me is like, that's my cake for reading, is when I've got the two timelines. So tell us a little bit about how you decided to put in two timelines. You easily could have just been like, nope, we're going to do the present. Maybe I'll give some flashbacks here and there, little bits, but so tell me about that. And how do you think, so that's part one.
Yeah.
How do you think that structure kind of amps up the tension in the story? So, and I'll repeat that if you can't.
Sure, yeah, no, that's
it's a long
great.
question. Sorry.
So basically, the story is told in these two timelines. One is set in 2018, where Audra, this gifted art student working on her MFA in painting, lures her very sort of problematic professor to Maine. And over the course of a weekend, Max, the professor, starts to realize that he's perhaps in grave danger, because Audra knows some secrets from his past that he would rather not have her know. And when I first wrote the book, that was the only timeline. It was the present timeline with these really brief sort of references, more than anything, to this past time frame. And in this present, there were other subplots that don't exist now. And so when I was working with my editor at Sourcebooks, I had mentioned in passing, I had thrown in this thing called, the Lupin Valley Arts Collective, just in passing. And my brilliant editor was like, what if we went there? And I was like, oh, really? And she was like, yeah. And so that's where the whole 1988 timeline came from, was this sort of charge to, okay, for that backstory, for that context, for sort of building the bridge between these secrets that Audra now knows about in the present. Where did those come from? How did that happen? How does she know about this? What were these terrible things that transpired at this arts camp in 1988? So for sure, once I had the 1988 timeline informing what was happening in the present, absolutely, I felt like I was really cooking with gas. Things were sort of talking to each other. Suddenly this timeline was in conversation with this timeline, and you start to sort of put together what's happening, and it really felt fully formed once that happened. So having the two timelines, I think, was a critical piece to the development of this book, for sure.
Got it. And do you feel that, now I feel as a reader, right, to me, that amped up that tension. It made it, I don't know if the word drive is really what I'm looking for, but it gave me sort of a reason to come back to the present. Was like, okay, now I know some of this, so now what's happening now, and how does it relate to that? did you feel that way writing it too? That sort of, did that help you make it more, more
Yeah,
intense? Yeah.
it did. It totally did. And in the actual writing process, I basically sat down, not in one sitting, but I wrote the 1988 timeline in a separate document from start to finish. And I
that was
didn't
going to be
worry
another
about,
side question. Okay, so
yeah.
tell us a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so once I had this charge to sort of like take us there, take us to the Lupin Valley Arts Collective in 1988, I was racking my brain with how to even like wrap my arms around doing that so that it all made sense, and it was going to be totally new content and new characters at a certain level. So with some overlap, of course, but so I basically said, okay, so I was like, the only way I could think of to do it was I had a separate document. I said, I'm just going to write what I think the story was in 1988, and I'll figure it out later how it's, where I'm going to cut it up and put things in, and how it's all going to, so it became this. And I think that past part works well because it was written pretty fluidly. It was written as one story, and then the sort of delicate weaving structure kind of happened afterward once I had it all in my brain and knew sort of what was what. So yeah, I think for sure having those two in conversation with each other totally amps up sort of the drive and the plot of what's going on, so you can really understand, wow, Audra's going to a lot of trouble to do something here this weekend. What is this all about? And that 1988 timeline really sheds a ton of light on what's going on.
Got it. All right. So art. Let's talk about art for a second. So art is a constant theme in both timelines that, it starts at the art camp. These are artists that we're working with here. I love the little side bits about, the museum description of here's this art piece. And I was like, oh, I felt like I should just sort of approach that like I was reading at a museum, right? And so art is obviously a huge plot point of this book. So can you tell us a little bit, do you have a background in art? Why did you decide to make them artists instead of anything else? Like give us the art world scoop here.
Yeah, super fair. So I don't really have any formalized background in art. I don't even do art that much. I do little crafty things, but not really painting or anything.
You talk like an art historian. I'm shocked by that. I thought for sure you'd be like, well, I have my master's in art history from Doerr, and
well, I'm glad I'm faking it well enough. This is good news.
You absolutely are killing it.
No, I basically I have such love for visual artists. Okay. I really admire visual artists, whether it's photography or painting or sculpture or sort of, fiber arts. I'm amazed by what visual artists can do. And I just thought, I was thinking about how, I went through an MFA for writing. Okay. And I was like, oh, there's some I think in any sort of arts graduate program, there are personalities that sort of emerge. And I was like, ooh, that would be a good framework to use. And then what I don't know, that I want to work with writers in the book. I thought something about the visual aspect of working with painters in this book really appealed to me. I said, oh, there's something very visceral about visual art. And of course, the challenge of translating that to writing is the trick. And I hope I did that well. I worked really hard at it. And so I was just attracted to the challenge. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but I have a little bit of the touch of synesthesia, where I have sort of a crossing of senses. So sometimes when I hear someone's voice, it also sounds like a flavor to me. Okay. Things like this, which really kind of lends itself very well to creative writing, actually, because it's all, creative sort of metaphors and things like that, and those kind of ways of thinking about language and having it be really textured. And so it lent itself well. And so I was like, I want to make this a visual. And of course, the thing that's nice about working with a visual medium too in writing is that it becomes this other text within a text, right? You get to sort of show things and develop things in this different way that you're not just narrating it, right? You're not just telling people about it. You are, to the best of your ability, doing that old thing of show, don't tell. Mm-hmm. And it gives you a sense of what's happening inside that artist at that time, hopefully.
Totally. Yes. I think that you definitely nailed that. I would have thought that you had that either were an artist yourself or studied art history. So sort of a tangent on that. Did you have either in your editing process or maybe, beta readers, did you have anybody like art connected take a look at that and say, oh, yes, this is exactly how that would have developed? Or, yes, that's the kind of language we would talk about when we're talking about our art? Or did that just kind of all come naturally and it just works?
I did research. I think that was the big key for me, is that this was not my world organically.
Okay.
And so I was like, I want to do it justice. I want to be respectful of this world and get it right to the extent that I can. And without it also kind of overtaking the book too. I don't want it to be jargony. I don't want it to be difficult and all these sorts of things.
Good point.
It's the mode that I want to use to tell this story. And so I just did some research about types of visual art and painting methods and terminology that gets used. And I looked up a couple of, painting MFAs that exist in the world. And I thought about my own MFA experience in writing. And I figured there has to be probably some parallels there with how those dynamics work. So it was kind of a mix of a little bit of research and a little bit of Imagineering. And that's kind of how it all came about.
And it came about so well. Excellent.
Well,
excellent. All right. So your book deals a lot with complicity, that people are getting away with stuff and who knows, who doesn't know, what do they know? We're all kind of, everyone's a little bit guilty of something or another. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how it plays out in the story? The idea of complicity?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that was really compelling to me about writing this book was that there was a part of me that I'm a big fan of like revenge stories. I love Nicolas Cage going nuts. I love, Charles Bronson and A Death Wish. I love, Taken, all these sorts of things. I find those very fun. And I was, thinking, okay, there's a lot of ones that are driven by men, those kinds of revenge stories, but not a ton where it's a woman sort of the driving force in the revenge plot. And I thought, I want to do that for sure. I would like to try to do that. I'm a fan of that. And then additionally, though, I was thinking about, this is I want this to feel like a pretty realistic or layered version of that. What those movies, of course, kind of put the blinders on about is all the collateral damage and the sort of psychological effects of killing 10 people on your way to saving your daughter, these sorts of things, right? And so I thought, I want this book to sort of have that real propulsion that that Audra is on a mission. She knows what her goal is. She is laser focused, but all of this is wrapped up in a lot of questions of conscience and morality and ethics and all sorts of things that are real. And so I think with every character that we meet in the book, like you said, some people know more than others about what has happened, but are afraid to speak up. For me, I think the character Juniper, for me, in a lot of ways, feels like the most painfully relatable, in the sense that she is a person who is put in a situation where she is experiencing or seeing or sensing things that she knows are not right, that are problematic, but maybe one of the people perpetrating those things, these are her friends, and the person who maybe is victimized is also a friend, and she's put in this weird situation. I think that, Juniper is that voice of that. I think we all have that nagging voice from time to time when, even it could be something small, something small to the very big stuff of, I sensed something was wrong. I should have said something. I didn't say anything. And I think we've all been there in certain ways. And I think it's a very human thing to sort of not know when to stick your nose in something and when not to. And so Juniper kind of is in that zone. And so that's, so between Audra, and her, and then of course, Max, the professor, has a lot going on. And this, especially with the camp, and really the graduate program too, I think they can be both thought of as sort of these closed ecosystems, and that can sometimes be dangerous when abuses are taking place. And I think that kind of comes to the fore in this book as well.
Absolutely, totally. So I want to we're going to switch gears a little bit to talk about your writing process. But one of the things I want to include in that, because I'd like to hear more about these characters. So the main question that I have is that, we speak to a lot of authors on this program. Everybody's got their different style of writing. We've got the folks who take notes in notebooks. We've got the folks that do their charts of all their characters. We've got the people who wake up every morning and they set aside their time to write, or they write in the evenings, etc. So I'd like to know just generally about your writing process. But what I'm really interested in also is if you could tell us a bit, since you have these, I mean, let's just say it, fairly dramatic characters here, right? Like they're all
for sure,
right? Okay,
absolutely.
Dramatic is a good word. I was trying to think of something that wasn't too negative. Yeah. So we have, they are personalities. I would like to know, as an offshoot, how did you kind of sketch them out beforehand, or did you? Maybe they all just came to you in your brain fully ready to go. But I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how that all works.
Sure. So generally speaking, sort of the mile high view is I am a writer who I find it noble and romantic when writers can be regular about it and write every day. I am not that person. I wish I was that person. I find it aspirational, but I've also tried it and it just doesn't work for me and I can't stick to it. And then I beat myself up for not doing it, which is never right. It's never good. So I have learned over many years of writing things that I just need to sort of follow what my instincts are. My instincts, I call it, I'm a tea kettle writer, I would say.
Tell me more about that.
Burble and think and kind of stew. And then when it whistles and it's time to go, I can really get down to business and do a lot in a day, in a week, in 2 months. And I'm ready to kind of really do it. But I'm not a regular sort of, I wish I was. I think it's a nice, well, I don't know. I don't want to say that. I think everybody should do what works for them. And this is what works for me. So, but I do find it very romantic, people who do that. So that's sort of the process. I sort of catch, I work full time. I have a day job. And so I just find time on weekends or after work when I can. And sometimes I take days off from work just to work on writing stuff. And, so that's how I do that. And then in terms of this book and the characters in this book, I am a person who's very much sort of pulled along by voice, how a character sounds and what they might say. And so I think the first voice that sort of I started just writing and not worrying about who they were, what they were really doing, was Audra. And then I realized that Audra was up to something. And then I realized that Max had to exist and all these sorts of things. So it kind of happened like that for me, where I just started writing, following voice, saying, oh, who sounds like, who would be the person who sounds like this, who is concerned with these things and thinks in this way. And then as things got more complicated and as the book became more fully formed, then I'm kind of what they call a pantser. I mostly just write and then I figure it out later. But as this book got more complex, because it is 2 timelines, it is like 4 perspectives, and they all interweave. I did have to, toward the final couple of developmental drafts, have like a Google sheet, like a database.
Okay.
Where I literally could like move. I had like, this, you scene number 1, and I described what it was, and then I could move them around at will to sort of figure out what really made sense. So yeah, it started off kind of loosey-goosey and all that stuff, but by the end it was like I have to refer to my database to like see what's going on and who goes where and stuff like that. So it was a really kind of wild experience in that way. Yeah,
that sounds like a really smart way to do it. I've always, not having any writing skill myself, I'm always fascinated how authors control their characters. And I think, putting them into a Google sheet and moving their scenes around is probably a really excellent way to.
I was like, I'm going to lose it if I don't like have a way to look at this visually. It's going to not work out.
That just really kind of sets the stage. That's really great. So we had a question that popped up super quick, that just because it relates to this, that they would like to know what your day job is actually, if you don't mind sharing that with us.
Sure. Yeah. So I work in like higher ed fundraising. So I work at a university foundation.
Got it. All right. So you're also pretty well versed in the world of academia, which also
between
comes clear.
Grad school and working on a college campus, I'm all in those vibes.
Got it. Got it. All right. Well, I think this would be a good time to pop up our trivia portion for the evening. So this is going to be a little bit different than what we've done before. Oftentimes what we do is we will take scenes or lines from the book and pop those up and have people guess either who said it or what was happening. But this one, my lovely friends at Sourcebooks have had a little bit of fun with this one. And I think it matches up with your timelines as well pretty well. So we're going to have these poll that pops up here. So in Dark Things I Adore, each character is given a nature-themed camp name that they go by while they're at this art camp. And it also serves really well as a plot device to kind of keep the reader guessing as to who's who and wait, do I know who that is? It's really awesome. So tonight we are going to let all of you decide some camp names for famous authors.
I love
it. Yeah, right. So there are no right or wrong answers here. You're not trying to guess because this stuff, she doesn't have Stephen King in the book, even though she lives in Bangor, Maine.
Right. And I love it.
But here we go. Our first one. What would we like to vote on Stephen King's camp name to be? So that question is popping up. We're going to give you all a couple seconds to think on that and answer it. We'll have two more coming. While those are happening, though, I want Katie to tell us what kind of books she likes to read. So we'd like to know if you have any recommendations for us, any favorite short stories, perhaps. Now, before you answer that, here's question number 2 that just came up. Tell us what you think Nicholas Sparks' camp name would be. But Katie, tell us a little bit about books that you enjoy.
Yeah, so I feel like we're so lucky. There's so many good books out now. There are so many good books out in the last couple of years. And then, of course, we have the whole of human history to look back on, too. Right. Books are so great that way. They never go out of style. But I think some ones that have really sort of struck me and stayed with me for various reasons. The Last Flight by Julie Clark was like an incredible page turner. I was like gripped, like absolutely gripped. I was like, this is crazy. I like read it. I'm a slow reader too, just naturally. And I read this in like a day, which for me is like unheard of. I was like on rocket boosters. I really loved Good Neighbors by Sarah Langan. Good Neighbors is incredible. It's incredibly beautifully written. It's witty. It's a little acerbic and biting. It has a lot of heart. There's some dark stuff that goes on in it, but it's incredible. It by Stephen King. I think that's my favorite Stephen King book that I've read. It's sort of rhapsodic and big and sprawling and lovely. Little Fires Everywhere, Celeste Ng, obsessed, fantastic, love it, really into it. I was like really bowled over by it. And then I really love Idaho by Emily Ruskovich. It's like, ooh, it's delicious. Like the language is delicious. It's sort of dark and tough and weird and gripping. And I think about that book all the time. The Overstory by Richard Powers, also another one of these big, rhapsodic, gorgeous books. And I think my all-time favorite book that I keep going back to is this book, this modernist book by Juno Barnes called Nightwood, which is just one of the most beautiful things that has ever happened to the English language, in my opinion. And so I love it for that reason especially, and it's super interesting. And so yeah, those would be
that is quite an endorsement there. So yeah. I know the Sourcebooks folks have this list and they're going to pop those titles into the chat, so don't worry if you missed it, because boy, she gave some really good recommendations there. So she'll get to those. The third question should be up on your screen at this point. What would Agatha Christie's camp name be? And we'll reveal all of the winning votes in just a moment. But since I know you are also a short story person, I love short stories as well. So do you have some short story recommendations for us?
I do.
Yay!
I love short stories. So I really love Two Brothers by Brian Evanson. It also has a really dark bent, super interesting, kind of like gnarly, so it's a little bit of a gnarly short story. Like
I like some gnarly short stories. Seriously,
incredible.
Okay.
The Wilds by Julia Elliott, and she has a collection out, I think, called The Wilds, out of Tin House. which is incredible. She's like, I think one of the best short story writers like out there. Like she might be one of the best writers out there, Julia Elliott. She's like amazing. Anthony Doerr of like Cloud Cuckoo Land and all that. He has this beautiful short story called The Deep that like makes me weep every time I read it, which is a hard thing to do, I think, in a short story, to get somebody to that place in that amount of time. But it's like, and it's so earned, and it's gorgeous and touching and moving. And then I would say lastly, Kelly Link's Valley of the Girls, which is this sort of I don't know if you call it near future, just sort of alternate kind of timeline where people have avatars who live their lives for them in the public eye until they come of age, especially if they're rich, so that if they're, so they can make mistakes in secret while their outward persona kind of does all the sort of shiny, polished, good life stuff. And then it talks about this sort of things, the complications that ensue from that. It's like super, super good.
All right. So like I said, I enjoy short stories, especially like creepy or gnarly ones. So I'm going to look all of those up.
Please.
And I will. And I also wanted to tell you, one of the things that library folks do is we hand sell and we try and get people interested in books. So I think, if this whole writing thing doesn't work out for you, maybe you want to come join us in library land, because I think you would make an excellent library readers advisory library.
I'm like honored.
Your descriptions just made me want to read all of those. So big thumbs up. And good. you can come work at my library anytime. So yeah. All right. So in just a moment, we are going to have the answers. Oh, here we go. If you can see that poll there. So Stephen King, it's a close tie between being mantis or bat. So there's an interesting nature themed for him. What would you have chosen, Katie?
I think I would have chosen bat.
Right.
Just because this is like a little bit of a cheat, but Stephen King has a house in Bangor where I live, and it's the famous sort of red Gothic house, and the wrought iron fence in front has these wrought iron bats on it. So it's hard for me not to. So that's like a cheat because I live like literally technically on the same street in Bangor as that house. So that was what was in my brain.
That is great. All right. So that is our first one. I'll pop up our second one in just a second here for good old Nicholas. All right. We have Swan was his choice. I was going to pick something like Bunny because he's so cutesy and sentimental, but Swan works too.
Swan, that's what I picked as well. Yeah.
Swan. I could see Cedar too, because the whole like romantic manly thing, right?
Sure, yeah.
I don't know what call people trees. I guess it's a little. And then let's see, Agatha Christie. Then we'll pop that up here. Oh, it is a clear winner for Agatha Christie.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And I think that I agree on that.
Yeah, I'm with the crowd on this one for sure.
All right. Well, good job with that, folks. Excellent. Thank you for participating. The votes are in, as they say. Also, I'd kind of like to see Stephen King, Agatha Christie, and Nicholas Sparks all at camp at the same time.
100%.
Right? Wouldn't that be?
That would be wild.
That would be wild. It would be quite an interesting little camp there.
Yes, it would.
All right. So it is now time for probably one of my favorite parts of the evening is the audience Q&A. We always get these fantastic questions from our viewers, and I have so many to pick here from. So let's see here. Here is one I would like to ask you. So this comes from Donna. And Donna says, Katie, you have published many acclaimed short works. What's the difference for you when you write your short fiction versus this full-length novel? What do you enjoy most or least about each form?
Oh my gosh, that's such a
Take a moment to think. That's all right. Yeah. These are all off the cuff, so you can think about it.
Yeah. I think for me, I really like short stories. I like working in short stories and doing short stories sometimes because they feel like these contained little puzzle boxes where you feel like there's finite borders to this thing I'm going to sort of make it, you kind of feel like it's probably a lie to oneself to just, so you can get through it. But you kind of feel like, oh, I can make this exactly what I want it to be on some way. There's some part of that that you're like, it's a self-contained little thing. And it has, one or two things going on, and you feel like you can kind of really get to where you want to go. And for me, short stories tend to be, and I'm different from other writers, and other writers are different from me, and it's everybody does it differently. But I feel like with short stories, I tend to have more of an idea about what I want to do going into it. Where with novels, they do feel at a certain point so unwieldy at times and big that you feel like you kind of don't always have control over what's going on, and they're harder to see kind of from a mile high view to really see kind of what's going on. And so that's why outside eyes, especially with like beta readers or editors, is like it's so necessary, because it's so hard to see this whole big thing when you've been inside of it for so long. And so I think that's part of it. Shorter time period, more finite, I think, is what makes short stories fun to write. And then it's also what makes novels fun to write, is the opposite, is that you get to sort of live inside of it and breathe it for a long time, and then try to sort of find your way out of it to see what it is once you can kind of put it up here, the manuscript, which is hard, actually.
Oh, I can only imagine. Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's not like a novel is just an extended short story. I mean, they are two very different animals.
Yeah, so, they feel very different. Yeah, to write, for sure.
For sure. All right. So we have a question from Amy, who would like to know, why do you think there is so much interest lately in dark academia books right now? And we've seen a lot of them. Again, it's a genre that I happen to like. I really couldn't put my finger on why, but maybe because, I enjoyed college. Sometimes I wish I could go back to college, because you're not really a grown-up there and you don't have your grown-up responsibilities. So she's curious if you were inspired by any similar works in sort of that dark academia vein in particular, which, is that what spurred you to write your own thriller with these great dark vibes? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, great question. I have to say, I think I was more kind of nebulously aware of dark academia. I think when, like for instance, when we were getting into the phase with being kind of done with the book and thinking about positioning and stuff, that was actually a term that was new to me when it was given to me by sort of the source book team. I said, okay, that's a thing. And of course, it's this big, vibrant thing that's been going on for a long time. And I'm just sort of like catching up. And so I don't think I was super aware that I was like engaging in a specific conversation. But then once I realized it, I said, I started like looking around. I was like, of course, this is like incredible. And I think that what does make it so attractive as a place to write about and write from and write through is that I think like a summer camp, like an arts camp, and college is this sort of, in most cases, like this self-contained liminal space. The whole point is that you go into it, you're thrown in with a random group of people. You have to figure it out, but you also know it's going to end, right? It's this really self-contained, interesting ecosystem that you kind of have to survive and thrive in, and then you're done, and then you move on. And it's a short period of time in the scheme of things. 4 years in the scheme of things of a person's life is not that long, but it has this huge impact because it's so formative. And I think the same argument can be made about camps. I think I never was an overnight camp person, but every friend I've ever known who has these like incredibly large mythic ties, beautiful ties to their camp experience, where they feel super connected to it and to the people that they went through that experience with. So I think this idea of having these spaces where things that wouldn't normally, people who wouldn't normally be in contact with each other suddenly are, in kind of somewhat pressurized situations socially and academically and aspirationally, is right for this. And then of course there is the reality that unfortunately I think sometimes academic settings, because of the power dynamics, can be ripe for sort of abuses in power. People who have sort of a cult of personality and get away with a lot because of that, because they're popular, but maybe they're not doing the right things all the time. And you see that in academia, and you see that in every industry, of course, where there's power dynamic imbalances, but that's certainly a thing I think that happens. And it's sometimes romanticized too, I think, in academia a bit. So.
All right. I'm like blown away by your answer. That was fantastic. Holy cow. I mean, it was a great question and an awesome answer. That I never thought about it until you said that, and it clicked. The parallel between like sleepaway camp and college. Like, you're right. They're their own contained little ecosystems.
Yeah.
And you're thrown in with people you don't know, and you have to kind of grow up, and you can try on a new persona. That's how we learn to be adults.
Yeah.
Wow, my mind is just poof now. And so the way that they fit together in this book, it's like dovetailing. Like, okay, we're done. I have nothing else I can even ask, because that was just so perfect. Holy cow. Whoo, that was a good one. Thank you for that, Katie. That was such an awesome answer. All right, but we have lots more questions to get through here. So let's see here. This is a fun one to dig more into the characters. This comes from Facebook. I hope I'm going to say your name right. This is from Lika. Maybe it's Leisha on Facebook. Sorry about that. Do your book characters talk to you while you're writing them? And if they do, have you had to change anything in the story because of it? I love that question.
Oh, that's funny. I don't think that they speak to me so much as I am. This is one, I think, the magical things about writing is that the more you write, I feel like it feels like you're weaving like a tapestry. And the more you kind of do it, the more threads that start to kind of get closer together, and you start to spot patterns in how these characters operate. And I think writing is great because it's a whole exercise in trial and error in that way, where you're just sort of writing and experimenting and seeing. And so for me, it's less that characters are sort of talking or in conversation with me, and more that like things start to sort of knit together and reveal themselves the more I write, because that means you're thinking about it too, right? You're writing, you're thinking about it, you're thinking about what you wrote in the past, you're thinking about where you're trying to head in the future. And things sometimes very sort of organically and accidentally start to work out just because of that tea kettle burbling that's going on even when you're sleeping, right? Things kind of, so I've always looked at it more like that, where it's like, the roots of a tree in the ground knitting together, or a tapestry kind of slowly knitting together into a whole. And that works with character as well as with a lot of the other craft elements, I think, of fiction as well.
That's a great metaphor for that, the knitting together. Yeah. Okay, from Lynn, we have a question. Earlier, you had mentioned how much you appreciate different art forms. And so Lynn would like to know if you have a favorite artist.
I actually do, which I'm not like a person who's usually up on stuff. I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's nice. That's cool. But there is this painter named Julie Beck who does these like hyper realistic paintings, and she does them of still lifes that she curates out of odd objects. So it's not just like a bowl of fruit. It's like a rabbit skull and like a ceramic hen cookie jar, like these odd tableaus that are like a little strange and a little, I don't know, but you see, and she has a fantastic Instagram, which everybody should follow, because she will show the actual real life inspiration, which like, oh, this can't all exist in one 2-foot space. There's no way. This is like so fantastical and sort of Tim Burton-esque in a way. And then she pans over and you see that she really found these weird little items. Oh, wow. And she put them together, and she does it, and they are so striking, and I'm obsessed with them, and I hope to one day own one of her paintings. I don't know how I can ever do that, but I would love to. She's great. Julie Beck. Julie Beck,
Beck.
Beck.
Okay, great. I'm sure people are Googling and Instagramming it right now.
Yeah.
All right. We have all these great questions. This is fabulous. From Jill. This is a good one. So you had mentioned that the plot we usually see especially in dark academia books, or in academia books in general, the plot we usually see is the professor having power over a student. So did you decide to swap this around before you actually started the book, or did it turn into that?
Oh no, I knew.
Okay, so
I knew.
you knew right away. You're like, we're gonna change this
I
power
was
dynamic.
like, Audra, I was like, I think one of the things that's been I've been like working on this thesis in my head for a little while about there are a ton of thrillers, and I love all of these thrillers. They're such good thrillers. But there are a ton of thrillers where the female protagonist, who's sort of the one on her back foot and having to like kind of scramble out of a situation, whether it's the girl on the train or the woman in cabin 10, these sorts of things, they're put in these situations where they are sort of not sort of at peak performance. Sometimes they're alcoholics, sometimes they have really traumatic backstories that makes you start to wonder as a reader, can I trust them? Do I believe them? And I think this has to actually do with society and how women internalize patriarchy and all kinds of things that these books are exploring and kind of reflecting back to us, to be perfectly honest. And so I was really interested in saying, what if the female protagonist in my book was the one from the jump, never on her back foot, really. She was the one leading the dance. And Max, who is this problematic predator, has the script flipped, where from the very start, where he's the one who is going to sort of have to be trying to scrabble and scramble and figure things out, and she's the one who's totally in control. So I knew from the beginning that I was really attracted to that idea, and I wanted to make that happen.
Very good. Very good. So I have two questions which are similar in nature, so I'm going to combine them. Maybe I'll ask one and then I'll immediately ask the other. So the first one is from Carly, who asks, when you're writing in this particular genre, for example, do you like to read a lot of similar examples, either immediately before or during your writing process, or do you prefer to take a break from the genre? So in this, it sounds like from your list, especially, you like thrillers and you like dark stuff. So do you prep for that and continue, or do you stop and say, okay, now I have to write my own, so now I can't read any of this for a while? Tell us a bit about that.
No, I really just organically really love thrillers and mysteries. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm not like the fastest reader in the world. Like between working and trying to write, if I get through 12 or 15 books a year, like I feel like I'm doing well. And so I just honestly grab and try to read what seems interesting to me at the moment. And that could be, The Last Flight by Julia Clark, or that could be The Overstory by Richard Powers, or that could be, what was Hidden Valley Road, that sort of book, the sort of nonfiction book that came out a year or two ago. There's not a lot of pre-thought that goes into what I'm reading when, just because I'm a very much like, I just want to read. And then if it sort of is in conversation with the book I'm writing at the time, that's cool. And if not, that's also cool.
Okay, that's a good answer. Good answer. So doubling back on that then. So from Tara, we have the question, do you think you will continue writing thriller novels, or do you plan to try a different genre next?
Yeah, so I think I have a manuscript in progress.
We always like to get the inside story here.
And it is dark. I don't know that it is sort of thriller in that sort of very expected sense of being sort of propulsive, where you're trying to figure out a mystery. I think it's something else that I'm currently working out exactly what it is and what the comps would be for it. But that remains to be seen. But it's still sort of in that same vibe space, I guess is what I would say, of Dark Inside Doerr, where it's about some harrowing stuff that happens, and we're going to figure out over time what that was. Whether there's sort of a mystery and major twist involved remains to be seen. It's more of a different style book, but I'd love to stay in the sort of thriller, mystery, suspense neighborhood, if that makes sense.
Got it. That's your jam right now.
That's my jam.
I feel it. I feel the vibe. So we have another question from Carly, who would like to know, did you have a favorite character in this book? And if so, what made them your favorite?
So for all of her foibles and maybe carrot failures and whatever, I really love Audra. Audra is a tough cookie. She's maybe, I got asked one time at a different event, do you agree with what Audra does in the book? And I would say,
ooh, that's a good question.
Right. Right. And so my answer is always this like two-part.
I'm gonna write that one down.
Yeah.
Do you agree with your characters?
I
That's
was like,
a good one.
And so basically I was like, in the context of this book, I'm like, Audra, get it, girl. Do you love everything that's going on? In my real life, could I try to execute something like this? Would I endorse somebody executing something like this? You don't know. I don't think so. But in the world of fiction, in the world of, and this is what, movies like Taken and Death Wish and all these are revenge fantasies, right?
Yeah.
And that's what a book like this is. Same with Quentin Tarantino. A lot of Quentin Tarantino movies follow a similar thread, right? Where it's a revenge fantasy, where the Nazis are really getting beat up in Inglourious Bastards and all these sorts of things where these very specific kind of like stick it to them things happen. So I would say that Audra is my favorite because I really wanted to see a woman in that position. And she's not perfect by any means, but I stand behind her in what she does in this book.
I love it. I mean, you gotta stick with your girl. I understand that. I understand. Yeah. Okay, great. Let's see. So from Donna, we have a very nice compliment and a question for you. So Donna says that you inspire her, that you seem like a very natural mentor. You've got valuable support resources listed in your book, and you have the Path series that you've posted to describe your author's journey. So she would like to tell us what inspires this empathetic side of you. And I think if I can interject into that question, right, it feels like, okay, you write this dark stuff, but in person you're very nice and you're very giving, right? I think that's the vibe we're getting here. So can you tell us a little bit about your softer side?
Oh, that's so nice. That's so lovely. Yeah, so basically, as a kid when I wasn't writing, I was making my brothers play school. And I was the teacher. And I was like, I want to make worksheets and I want to explain things. I want to have handouts. And then when I went into grad school, I was fortunate enough to get some teaching time, both in my master's and in my MFA programs, where I got to teach creative writing. And then I did some part-time creative writing teaching, even when I was working in the fundraising job for a couple of years, just because I enjoyed it so much. And so I think there's that part of me. I love teachers. I am amazed by teachers. The little bit of teaching I've done has been incredible. And I get why people are so committed to it, even when society sometimes doesn't value it the way it should. It's insane. So I think there's that little bit of teaching, a little bit of the teaching knack in me that I've always really loved. And then I think also, as a writer, I think sometimes if you want to publish traditionally, I feel like sometimes there's this like unnecessary veil of like secrecy around everything, as if you sort of talk about how you got a book deal, it suddenly is going to make you not be able to get another one. Like there's only a certain amount of seats at the table or something, and you might get bumped off. And I don't think, from what I have experienced so far, that's how it works. And so I just felt like all the author blogs that I sort of really leaned on when I was trying to figure it out with an agent and trying to figure it out with how to write a query letter, I was like so grateful for. And I kind of vowed to myself that if I was ever in a position where I had some of this information, I would share it, because it's not proprietary. It's not, there's no magic to it. It's just you try to write the best book you can, and then you try to write a good query letter, and you just it's all stick-to-itiveness and learning the hard way. And I don't think we talk enough about that. It's not this magical, mysterious thing where you're some magical person who gets it done, or you're just a person who gets it done, I think. And so yeah, I just wanted to make sure I shared that, because I felt like it was a little bit of a veiled world sometimes. All
right. I'm sorry. I want you to start a writers group. And then even though I don't write, I want to join it, because I mean, it's true. That's really you seem like an extremely generous person, and that's really valuable. And so I kind of like it that now I know that you're like this really nice, generous, giving person. And boy, I'm gonna write you some dark, gnarly stuff. Like that is just I love it. It's perfect.
We all contain multitudes, right?
We do.
That's
I
it.
contain multitudes. I love it. That is awesome. That is so great. All right. So we are just about to wrap up here. We have really great questions. I love our audience. They get into this so well. I love the stuff we've asked so far, but this one came through that I want to ask as our last question, as sort of a fun, sort of non-book related question, because we are in spooky season, and this is, you're a nice, dark, creepy book here. So Katie on Facebook wants to know, and I'm going to answer it as well. What kind of Halloween candy are you giving out this year?
Well, so I am fortunate to live in a nice, sort of a very good trick-or-treating neighborhood with lots of good sidewalks, and like people get into it. They put up lights and decorations. So we get a ton of kids coming down there, adorable costumes. So I think I always like, I'm number one, a Reese's peanut butter cup. Like, obviously that's like my jam.
Classic.
I buy them October 1st, and it's for me to just take a sample and make sure everything's still chill with them,
we
all that
have to be careful here. Think of the children.
Twix, mini Twix bars, dark chocolate pieces, a lot of chocolate based stuff, and then I love Starburst. Oh boy, Starburst. What about you? What kind of candy situation are you dealing with?
So here's my candy situation. We live in a fairly small town, and our neighborhood is a little bit off the beaten path. So we don't get a lot of trick-or-treaters, but you never know. Like there have been years when we had a lot and years that we don't. So I tried one year to be like, well, I'm going to get the candy that I don't like so that I'm not worried about having leftovers. And then I was like, what? Why am I doing that? Get the stuff I want so I can have all the leftovers. Yes.
Correct.
So what we did this last year, and I'm going to do it again this year because 2020 was so ridiculous for everybody.
Yeah.
We went and got full-size candy bars.
God bless.
And I was like,
Rebecca, like, honestly, like, you're doing the Lord's work out there. Like, what is happening?
I was like, everybody deserves a full-size candy bar. Yes. And we made the parents take them, and we made the mailman, when he came up, I'm like, made him take candy. And so this year, we're fortunate that I live really close to Costco, and every October they discount the boxes. So I'm only paying like, less than 50 cents a bar. So
it would be crazy not to do it.
I mean,
right? You're telling me.
Yes. So I went and got full-size candy bars again this year. I have to say the full-size Twix, I actually like the little ones better. I'm not sure what it is, but I've taste tested to make sure the children would be happy.
Exactly.
And I determined that small ones. And then I also do try and make sure I have some that's non-chocolate so that anybody with, nuts and allergies, we've got like one year we did Sour Patch Kids as sort of a backup. So.
Oh yes, Swedish Fish. That's another good
Swedish
one.
Fish. That's my jam. Yep.
So good.
Yep. All right. Well, I think this is a perfect place to end this delightful interview because we always like to end on a high note. So Katie, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you. I cannot say how much I have enjoyed this. So thank you for spending your night with us. I know that you're busy, and this is very meaningful, not only to me, not only to the folks at Source Books, but also to our wonderful audience. I'm hoping they enjoyed this as much as I did. So
this was such a delight, honestly. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, everyone on the team. Thank you, everybody, for coming, a weeknight to one of these things. I know there's been a lot of Zooming in the last year and a half, so I really appreciate everybody for showing up. It means a ton. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to our fabulous audience. You know how much I adore you all. We do have our winners listed there in the chat. We've got Tara, Robin, and Lynn. Congratulations. So please email Emily Ludoff at sourcebooks.com. Her email is right there in the chat. So shoot her an email so you can claim your book bundle prizes. Again, a big thank you to all of you, and make sure you join us for next month's event. So the next Mystery at the Library event is actually going to be Wednesday, December 1st. So if you've got this as a regular event on your calendar, Don't forget to scoot it up a week. We're going to take that Thanksgiving week off and do this the first week of December instead. Don't worry, we'll get it out on social media to remind you. It'll be Wednesday, December 1st, same time, 7 o'clock Eastern. I will be talking to international best-selling author Susanna Kearsley about her latest historical novel and October 2021 Library Reads pick, The Vanished Days. So the registration information is there in the chat, so grab that link before we pop off. Go ahead and register early for that. Thank you again for joining us, everyone. Thank you so much, Katie. I can't wait till your next one comes out because I'm hoping we get the chance to talk again about it.
I'd love to.
So happy Halloween. Enjoy your candy bars. I'm in Forest Park, Illinois, for those of you who asked where they can come get the full-size candy bars. Come on by.
I'm leaving on the plane right now.
Katie's going to be out there with me. We're going to pull up the fire pit and, have a little fun. So have a fantastic evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.